Hello and welcome to Mystery Tales channel, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. It was the 3rd of November, 1887, a night when the fog of London pressed so thickly against the windows of 221B Baker Street that the gas lamps in the street below seemed mere pinpricks of gold in a sea of grey. I, John H. Watson, M.D., late of the 5th Northumberland Fusiliers, had returned from my modest practice in Paddington with the damp still clinging to my ulster and the chill of the autumn evening gnawing at my bones. Chapter 1. The Shadowed Visitor. It was the 3rd of November, 1887, a night when the fog of London pressed so thickly against the windows of 221B Baker Street that the gas lamps in the street below seemed mere pinpricks of gold in a sea of grey. I, John H. Watson, M.D., late of the 5th Northumberland Fusiliers, had returned from my modest practice in Paddington with the damp still clinging to my ulster and the chill of the autumn evening gnawing at my bones. The familiar odor of Mrs. Hudson's shepherd's pie lingered in the stairwell, mingling with the sharper tang of Holmes's shag tobacco and the faint, acrid bite of chemical reagents from his latest experiment. I pushed open the sitting-room door and found my friend in his mouse-colored dressing gown, his lean frame sprawling across the settee like a great cat sunning itself before a fire. One long arm dangled to the carpet, fingers brushing the neck of his Stradivarius. The other cradled a Persian slipper stuffed with the strongest black shag obtainable in the metropolis. A litter of newspapers, the Times, the Pall Mall Gazette, the Evening Standard, lay scattered about him like the fallen leaves of Regent's Park. "Ah, Watson," he murmured without opening his eyes, "you are precisely 7 minutes late. The 5:47 from Paddington was delayed by a points failure at Royal Oak. You paused at the tobacconist in Praed Street, Bradley's I presume, and purchased 3 ounces of Arcadia mixture. The mud on your left boot is from the clay soil of the Edgware Road omnibus terminus, and you have treated no fewer than 4 cases of influenza today, judging by the carbolic on your cuffs and the faint wheeze in your breathing." I laughed, though not without a touch of exasperation. "Holmes, one of these days I shall arrive in a diving suit and a false beard just to confound you." "Pray do not trouble yourself," he replied, sitting up with that sudden panther-like grace of his. "The mere absence of your customary limp would suffice. Now be a good fellow and ring for some coffee. Mrs. Hudson's blend is the only antidote to this infernal fog." I complied, and while we waited, I cast my eye over the morning's Post, which lay unopened upon the table. Among the usual bills and circulars was a square envelope of heavy cream-laid paper, sealed with black wax impressed by a signet bearing the device of a dragon couchant. Holmes's eyebrow arched like the spring of a trap. "Curious," he said, snatching it up. "The paper is handmade, watermarked J. Whatman, 1886. The seal is Oriental, Cantonese, I should say, and the postmark is Belgravia, 4:30 p.m. yesterday. Yet the ink is still faintly damp. Whoever dispatched this did so in haste." He slit the envelope with a scalpel from his pocket and drew forth a single sheet. The message was brief, penned in a spidery hand. Holmes's eyes glittered. "A threat, Watson, and a melodramatic one. But observe the pressure of the pen, light at the commencement, heavier toward the end." The writer began with confidence and ended in agitation. The paper bears a faint trace of attar of roses, feminine, yet the phrasing is masculine. A paradox. Before I could comment, there came a commotion in the passage. Mrs. Hudson appeared, her cap slightly askew, her round face flushed with indignation and not a little fear. "Mr. Holmes, sir, there's a lady below, insists on seeing you at once. She's in a terrible state, veil soaked through, and won't give her name to anyone but yourself." Holmes sprang to his feet. "Show her up, Mrs. Hudson, and bring a second pot of coffee. Watson, the game is afoot." Visual. The door opens wider. A woman enters, shrouded in a black silk cloak dripping with rain. Her gloved hands clutch a small reticule as though it contains the crown jewels. Beneath the sodden veil, her face is deathly pale, the eyes wide and haunted. Behind her, the gas jet in the passage flickers, casting her shadow long and wavering across the wallpaper. The visitor hesitated upon the threshold as though the warmth of our fire were an alien element. Holmes bowed with courtly grace. "Pray enter, madam. You are among friends. This is my companion, Dr. Watson, whose discretion is as absolute as his courage is proven." I rose and offered my chair nearest the blaze. She sank into it with a shudder, pushing back her veil to reveal features of refined beauty marred by grief and terror. She was perhaps 35, with hair of a rich auburn escaping in damp curls from beneath her bonnet, and eyes of a singular violet hue now rimmed with unshed tears. "Mr. Holmes," she began, her voice trembling yet resolute, "my name is Amelia Hargrove. I am, or was, niece to Sir Reginald Hargrove, whose residence is in Wilton Crescent, Belgravia. 2 nights ago he was found dead in his study, the door bolted from within, a glass of poisoned brandy at his elbow. The police pronounce it suicide, but I know it was murder." Holmes seated himself opposite her, steepling his long fingers. "Pray compose yourself, Miss Hargrove, and relate the circumstances in their entirety. Begin with the evening of the tragedy." She drew a deep breath, steadying herself against the arm of the chair. "Sir Reginald was a widower, my mother's brother, and had raised me since I was a child. He was a merchant of considerable wealth, importing silks, spices, and curiosities from India and the Far East. His establishment in Belgravia was a model of elegance, mahogany panels, Persian carpets, a library second to none. On the night in question, Tuesday last, he entertained a small party. His business partner, Mr. Elias Thorne, his estranged son, Mr. Geoffrey Hargrove, and myself. We dined at 8, and the mood was convivial. Uncle spoke excitedly of a new venture, a shipment of Kashmiri sapphires due to arrive within the fortnight. Chapter 2. The scene of the crime. The morning of the 4th broke dull and drizzly, the fog lifting only enough to reveal the mournful facade of Sir Reginald Hargrove's residence in Wilton Crescent. A constable stood sentinel at the door, his cape beaded with moisture. The brass knocker had been draped in black crepe. Holmes sprang from the cab with the eagerness of a terrier scenting quarry, while I followed more soberly, my medical bag in hand. Inspector Lestrade greeted us with his customary blend of resentment and reluctant respect. "Holmes, you're like a bad penny. The Yard's already ruled it suicide. Door bolted inside, poison on the desk, debts in the ledger. Why waste your morning?" Holmes's eyes danced. "Because, my dear Lestrade, the door may have been bolted, but the mind that conceived the bolt was not inside the room. Lead on." We were conducted through the silent house, servants tiptoeing, mirrors veiled, and up a broad staircase carpeted in Axminster. Miss Hargrove met us on the landing, pale but composed, her black bombazine rustling like dry leaves. "The study is as it was left," she whispered. "Even the glass remains untouched." The study door stood ajar, sealed only by a strip of police tape now fluttering in the draught. Holmes paused on the threshold, his gaze sweeping the room like a searchlight. Holmes entered on the balls of his feet as though the carpet might betray footprints to the careless. I followed, noting the chill. Windows closed, fire long dead, yet a faint cloying sweetness lingered beneath the coal smoke. "Observations, Watson," Holmes murmured, already on his knees with lens and tape. I surveyed professionally. Rigor past, body removed yesterday. Lividity would have been posterior. No external injuries reported. The tumbler, brandy residue, foam at the rim suggestive of emesis. Phial half empty, cork beside it. Ledger opened to a column of red ink. Losses, certainly. Holmes sniffed the glass. Brandy, yes, but laced with oil of bitter almonds. Cyanide, not arsenic. The file is a blind. Its contents are pure arsenic, but the poison taken was prussic acid, instantaneous. Observe the foam, pinkish, characteristic of cyanogenesis. He turned to the door. Bolted from within. Oak, 2-inch bolt, no play in the socket. Key on the inside, no duplicate found. Windows? He crossed to the pair of sash windows overlooking the area railings. Fastened, paint undisturbed, yet note the sill, fine scratches, as though a jimmy were used, then polished away. Lestrade snorted. A cat burglar who locks up after himself? Ridiculous. Holmes ignored him, crawling beneath the desk. Ah, here we have it. From the turkey carpet he plucked a single crimson thread, silk, lustrous, no more than an inch long. Not from the rug nor the chair coverings, curious. Miss Hargrove hovered by the fireplace. Uncle kept a decanter on the mantel, always filled from the same bottle in the cellarette. He took a nightcap precisely at 11. Holmes lifted the heavy cut-glass decanter. Half full, same brandy. But observe the sediment, minute crystals, iridescent. Potassium cyanide, introduced after the gathering. Someone knew his routine. I examined the file. Arsenic for specimens, perfectly legitimate in a collector's house, but cyanide, none listed in the inventory. Lestrade shuffled. The old man could have procured it secretly. Debts disgrace the... Holmes whirled. Debts! Show me the ledger. The inspector thrust it forward. Columns of figures marched in Sir Reginald's neat copperplate until the final page where the ink changed to a coarser nib. The entries erratic. Forged, Holmes declared. The genuine hand slopes left. This slopes right. Someone wished to suggest ruin. He moved to the fireplace. Above the mantel hung a portrait of Sir Reginald in Mandarin robes, a Cantonese junk behind him. Holmes tapped the frame. It swung aside on concealed hinges, revealing a small safe. Combination? Miss Hargrove paled. Uncle never told, only that it held the dragon seal and papers from China. Holmes spun the dial with practiced ear. Click, click, click. The door swung open. Inside, the dragon signet, a bundle of yellowed letters tied with red silk and, most startling, a second file, identical to the first but labeled cyanide of potassium. Lestrade gaped. He kept both poisons? Or the murderer did, Holmes replied. The arsenic file on the desk is a plant. This is the true source. Note the safe was relocked. Our killer has the combination. Holmes extracted the letters. The topmost in faded ink read, "The dragon remembers. Blood for blood. Postmarked Calcutta, 1867. 20 years ago, I murmured. Sir Reginald's early days in trade. Holmes's eyes gleamed. A motive older than the niece, deeper than debts. But the method, the method. He knelt by the hearth. The fireback was soot-black, but a faint handprint marred the grime. Small, delicate, gloved. Someone descended the chimney after the fire died. The flue is wide, built for sweeping boys. A slight person could manage it. Lestrade scoffed. A murderous chimney sweep? Or a woman in boy's clothing, Holmes countered. Observe the boot-black smudges on the fender, fresh despite the room being sealed. The police. Tape was cut and reattached with mucilage. Smell it. I bent close. The sweetish odor was unmistakable. Miss Hargrove gasped. The bolt was drawn back yesterday morning. I told you. Holmes straightened. The killer returned to retrieve something. The genuine threatening letter, perhaps, or to plant the forged ledger. We interrupted the performance. He crossed to the bookcase opposite the desk, a towering mahogany affair laden with volumes on Oriental trade. His fingers danced along the shelves, pausing at a first edition of Marco Polo. A soft click. The entire section swung inward, revealing a narrow passage papered in faded chinoiserie. "A priest's hole," I exclaimed. "Ah, from the Catholic persecutions?" "Or a smuggler's dodge," Holmes said. "It leads. Listen." He pressed his ear to the wall. Faint sounds of the kitchen below drifted up. "Directly to the servant's stair. The killer entered thus, poisoned the decanter, waited behind the bookcase until Sir Reginald drank, then locked the door from within and departed the same way, bolting it behind with a string, perhaps drawn through the keyhole and retrieved." Lestrade was speechless. Holmes closed the panel. "Your suicide, Inspector, has sprouted wings and flown up the chimney. We have cyanide introduced between 10:45 and 11:15 p.m. A hidden entrance, a forged motive, and a 20-year-old grudge. The game, my dear Lestrade, is most decidedly afoot." As we descended the grand staircase, Miss Hargrove clutched my arm. "Dr. Watson, who could hate Uncle so fiercely?" I patted her hand. "Holmes will tell us, my dear. He always does." In the hall, Holmes paused beneath the chandelier, his silhouette sharp against the stained glass. "Watson, we require 3 things. The manifest of that Kashmiri sapphire shipment, the alibis of every soul in this house between 10 and midnight, and a visit to the docks. The Dragon, I fancy, arrived by sea." Chapter 3. Whispers in the fog. The fog that had greeted the dawn now clung to London with the tenacity of a creditor, turning the city into a labyrinth of muffled bells and phantom silhouettes. Holmes and I had spent the morning at Wilton Crescent, cataloging every servant's movements and securing the sapphire manifest from Sir Reginald's safe. By 3 o'clock we stood before the counting-house of Mr. Elias Thorne, the dead man's partner whose name had appeared too often in the forged ledger for comfort. A clerk with ink-stained cuffs ushered us into a cavernous office smelling of cedar, camphor, and the sharp bite of sealing wax. Maps of the Bay of Bengal papered the walls, crates stamped Calcutta, and Canton teetered in pyramids. Behind a desk the size of a billiard table sat Thorne himself, portly, florid, mutton-chop whiskers bristling like wire brushes. His waistcoat strained across a belly that spoke of many a city banquet. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, an honor, though scarcely a pleasure under the circumstances." His voice was a bass rumble, but his eyes flicked to the door as though measuring escape routes. "Reginald's death is a tragedy. The police are imbeciles," Holmes cut in, seating himself without invitation. "We are here about the sapphires, the ledger, and your whereabouts between 10 and midnight on Tuesday." Thorne's jowls quivered. "I was at Covent Garden, Faust, 2nd act. Returned home by hansom at 12:30. My wife and butler will vouchsafe it." Holmes produced the manifest. "This shipment, £20,000 worth of Kashmiri stones, was insured in both your names. Yet the premium lapsed 3 days ago. Curious timing." "Reginald handled the policies," Thorne blustered. "I knew nothing." "Until you forged the ledger to suggest ruin," Holmes interrupted softly. "The ink is Higgins India, batch 87B, sold only at Bradley's in Praed Street, the same shop where Dr. Watson purchased tobacco yesterday. You followed him, perhaps?" Thorne's face purpled. I felt the temperature drop. Outside, a costermonger's barrow rattled past, its bells swallowed by fog. Holmes rose, prowling the room like a leopard. He paused at a lacquered cabinet, flicked it open. Inside, a crystal decanter identical to Sir Reginald's, half full of brandy. Holmes lifted it to the gaslight. Minute crystals sparkled at the bottom. "Cyanide, Mr. Thorne, the same sediment. You supplied the poison, then attended the opera to establish distance." Thorne surged to his feet. "Preposterous, But Holmes was already at the window, peering through the grimy panes. Watson, observe the alley. A man in a bowler loitering since we arrived. Your confederate? Thorne lunged for a bell pull. Holmes caught his wrist. No need for reinforcements. We are leaving. After I take this. From Thorne's desk, he snatched a scrap of crimson silk, twin to the thread found in the study. A bookmark, perhaps, or evidence. We emerged into Cornhill to find the fog now a solid wall of yellow-gray. Gas lamps flickered like corpse candles. The air tasted of soot and river mud. Holmes hailed a growler, but before we climbed in, a urchin darted from the shadows, ragged cap, bare feet despite the cold, thrusting a folded paper into my gloved hand. For Mr. Holmes, from a lady with violets in her eyes. The boy vanished before I could tip him. The note, scrawled on cheap paper, read, Holmes's eyes narrowed to slits. Amelia Hargrove's eyes are violet, but the handwriting slopes left masculine. Allure, Watson, yet we must spring the trap. We dismissed the cab and plunged into the fog on foot, threading through alleys where the walls wept moisture and the cobbles glistened like fish scales. The monument to the Great Fire loomed ahead, a fluted Doric column piercing the haze, its urn of flames gilded even in gloom. At its base stood a veiled figure cloak, swirling like ink in water. Miss Hargrove? I called softly. The figure turned, and a man's laugh, low and mocking, issued from beneath the veil. He threw it back to reveal a lean, swarthy face, eyes black as sloes, a scar livid from temple to jaw. In his gloved hand glinted a navy revolver. Sherlock Holmes, he hissed in accented English. The dragon sends his regards. Holmes was calmness itself. You are late of the SS Oriental Star, third mate, dismissed in Calcutta for smuggling. The scar is from a Lascar's knife. Sir Reginald ruined you. The man's lip curled. He ruined many. The sapphires were to be my vengeance, payment for a stolen life, but another struck first. He tossed a small object at Holmes's feet, a second dragon seal, but of brass, not gold. Find the woman who wears its twin. She is the poisoner. Before we could move, a whistle shrilled. 2 constables burst from the fog, summoned by some unseen signal. The stranger fired once into the air, then melted into the crowd that materialized like wraiths, costermongers, clerks, flower girls, all pressing forward in the confusion. Holmes snatched the brass seal. Quick, Watson, after him! But the fog had swallowed our quarry as completely as the Thames swallows suicides. We stood beneath the monument, the echo of the gunshot rolling around the column like thunder in a barrel. Holmes turned the seal in his palm. 2 dragons, 1 gold, 1 brass. Thorne's is the partner's seal, this is the Avenger's. Yet both point to a woman. Amelia Hargrove, the housemaid Eliza, or another entirely? I caught his arm. The note threatened Amelia's life. A blind, he said grimly. The true target is the sapphires, and the ledger that hides their real value. Come, we must reach the docks before the Oriental Star sails on the tide. As we hurried toward the river, the bells of St. Magnus Martyr struck 5, their bronze voices muffled yet urgent. Somewhere in that yellow haze, a murderer walked free, and the dragon's breath grew hotter with every passing minute. Chapter 4. The Suspicious Air. The fog had followed us from the city, thickening into a sulphurous broth that turned every street into a tunnel and every stranger into a suspect. Holmes and I had spent the afternoon at the docks, confirming that the SS Oriental Star had indeed sailed on the evening tide. Minus her scarred third mate, who had vanished like smoke through a keyhole. The brass dragon seal burned in Holmes's pocket, its twin in gold still linking us to Elias Thorne. Yet one name had surfaced repeatedly in the servants' whispers and the forged ledger. Geoffrey Hargrove, the prodigal son, disinherited for debts at the gaming tables. We found him at the Marlborough, that bastion of spendthrifts and second sons. Geoffrey was 28, dissolute in the way only old money can afford. Hair slicked with macassar, waistcoat of peacock silk, a diamond pin, winking like a false promise. His eyes, violet like his cousin Amelia's, were bloodshot, the pupils pinpricks despite the dim light. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes," he drawled, not rising. "And the good doctor. To what do I owe the pleasure? Come to arrest me for patricide?" Holmes took the opposite chair, leaning forward with that unnerving stillness. "Merely to establish your movements on Tuesday night, Mr. Hargrove, between 10 and midnight." Geoffrey smirked. "I was at Crockford's, losing 1,000 guineas at écarté. Lord Reginald Phipps, Sir Henry Blaine, and young Lord Arthur Clifton will vouch for me. I staggered home to Albany at 2, soused but solvent." I noted the tremor in his voice, the way his gaze slid to the door. "Your father threatened to cut you off entirely unless you reformed. The sapphires would have paid your vowels." He laughed, a brittle sound. "Father threatened every quarter day." "I was at the tables, doctor. Ask the croupiers." Holmes produced the crimson silk thread from an envelope. "This was found beneath your father's desk. It matches the lining of a waistcoat you wore to Ascot last June, photographed in the Illustrated London News. Silk from lion dyed with cochineal and indigo. Rare." Geoffrey's complacency cracked. "I visited father on Monday. We quarreled. The thread must have traveled through the secret passage on Tuesday night," Holmes interrupted. "The bookcase panel was oiled recently. Castor oil, the same brand used in your Albany dressing room." Geoffrey drained his glass, choking on the dregs. "I swear I was at Crockford's. Check the betting book." Holmes rose. "We shall, but first your boots." He knelt with startling swiftness, lifting Geoffrey's foot. The sole bore a crescent of Belgravia clay, yellow, sticky, identical to the patch outside the study window. "Fresh. You walked in the garden after rain, yet claim to have been indoors since Monday." Geoffrey jerked away. I keep a spare pair at father's house, changed before the club." "A lie," Holmes said softly. "The clay contains mica flecks from the Wilton Crescent flower beds, planted last spring with alpine specimens. Your Albany boots are London mud only." The young man's bravado collapsed. "Very well. I went to the house Tuesday evening after the opera crowd left. Father was alone in the study. We argued. He offered £500 to vanish to the continent. I refused. He turned to the decanter, poured a glass. I stormed out through the garden, slamming the French window. He was alive when I left, I swear it." Holmes's eyes glittered. "You saw no one else? Heard nothing?" "Only the clock striking 11 and a rustle behind the bookcase. I thought it rats." Holmes seized Geoffrey's wrist, turning it to reveal a faint bruise. 4 fingerprints, small and precise. "Someone restrained you. A woman's grip?" Geoffrey flushed. "Eliza, the housemaid. She overheard, threatened to tell Miss Hargrove unless I paid her silence. I gave her a sovereign." I exchanged a glance with Holmes. The net tightened. "Enough," he cried. "Arrest me if you must, but I did not poison him. Check Crockford's. I arrived at 11:17, signed the book. The barman poured me a brandy at 11:25. Cyanide acts in minutes. Impossible." Holmes considered. "Yet you returned later via the garden to retrieve something. Perhaps the genuine ledger showing the sapphire's true value. You disturbed the killer mid-flight." Geoffrey sank back, trembling. "I went back at 1 a.m. The study was dark, the door bolted. I peered through the keyhole. Saw father slumped. The glass spilled. I panicked, fled." Holmes produced the brass dragon seal. "This was thrown at my feet today by a man claiming vengeance for Calcutta. Recognize it?" Geoffrey stared, then laughed hysterically. That's the seal Father used for personal letters. He kept it in the safe. If someone else has it, then the killer has access to the safe, Holmes finished. And the combination was known to family and to you. We left the club as the fog rolled in from the river, thicker than ever. Behind us, Jeffrey's sobs echoed off marble. Holmes lit his pipe, the match flaring like a signal. Watson, we have a son who lies about his movements, a housemaid who blackmails, and a safe breached by someone intimate with the household. Tomorrow we descend to the docks again. The sapphires arrived on the Oriental Star, and someone paid a fortune to keep them hidden. As the bells of St. James's tolled 8, I felt the chill of more than November air. The dragon had 2 heads, and both were closing in. Chapter 5. A Trail of Crimson. The tide was turning as Holmes and I reached the Pool of London, that teeming artery where East met West in a riot of jute, indigo, and the cries of lascars. The fog had retreated to the river's edge, leaving a damp chill that seeped through overcoats like a thief's fingers. Our inquiries at Crockford's had confirmed Jeffrey's partial alibi. He had indeed signed in at 11:17, but the barman's memory of the brandy pour was hazy, bought perhaps with a florin. The crimson thread burned in my mind, linking sun to scene. Yet Holmes's silence spoke of deeper waters. The sapphires, Holmes said at last, his voice low against the gull's raucous parliament. They are the heart of this, Watson. Sir Reginald's fortune, Geoffrey's desperation, Thorne's forged ruin, all orbit that cargo. If the scarred sailor sought them, so does the killer. We approached the Hargrove and Thorne depot, a squat brick edifice squatting beside the customs house. The foreman, a grizzled Scot named McTavish with a clay pipe clenched like a fang, met us at the gate. His eyes narrowed at Holmes's card. Aye, the stones arrived Tuesday morn on the Star, locked in the strong room yonder. Sir Reginald himself came down at noon to inspect, unusual that, took a sample pouch away with him. Holmes knelt before the chest, his fingers tracing the hasp. No scratches, opened with the proper key. He flipped the lid. Inside, velvet trays cradled stones the size of pigeon eggs, blue as a Kashmiri sky. 20 flawless sapphires worth a baronetcy. But one tray gaped empty. Stolen? I breathed. McTavish spat tobacco juice. Nay, sir. Sir Reginald took 3 for valuation. The rest are here, safe as the tower. Holmes's lens swept the interior. Observe the sawdust, disturbed yet evenly. Someone rifled it post-inspection. From the corner he plucked a splinter of crimson wood, teak, lacquered, matching the thread's hue. From a Chinese puzzle box, perhaps. Hidden compartments are a merchant's vice. As McTavish locked up, a docker approached, lean, lantern-jawed, with tattoos of dragons coiling his forearms. Heard ye askin' about the old man. I saw him Tuesday arguing wi' a lass in black. She had a red shawl, foreign make, slipped him a parcel, then scarpered. A woman? Holmes pressed. Description? 30-odd auburn hair, veil, like the niece but with a limp. Club foot, maybe. They went into the fog toward Wapping. Amelia Hargrove had no limp. Eliza the housemaid did, from a childhood fever. The trail crimsoned. We pressed on to Wapping Stairs, where the river lapped at slime-slick steps and the air reeked of fish guts and tar. Holmes bartered with a waterman for passage to the Isle of Dogs, but en route he examined the splinter. Teak from Guangdong, Watson. Sir Reginald imported puzzle boxes for the novelty trade. Gifts for clients. One such box could conceal cyanide crystals slipped into the decanter unseen. Our boat nudged a pier amid a forest of masts. Here, in the shadow of the West India docks, lay the undercroft of empire, coolies unloading tea chests, opium pipes glowing in doorways, a babel of Hindustani and Cantonese. Holmes led us to a chandler's shop, its sign a faded dragon coiled about an anchor. The proprietor, a wizened Eurasian named Lee, bowed low. "Mr. Holmes, word travels. You seek the poison?" Holmes slid a sovereign across the counter. "Cyanide of potassium procured this week for Sir Hargrove's trade." Lee's eyes flickered. "Not procured here, but sold to a woman veiled with violet eyes, paid in sapphires, 1 stone, flawed but large, said it was for rats in Belgravia cellars." "Sapphires," I echoed. "From the shipment? Flawed? A red herring?" Holmes murmured. "The genuine stones are perfect. This was cut glass, perhaps, to mislead." Lee fetched a ledger. "Name? Eliza Grimes, housemaid. Address, Wilton Crescent." He paused. "But she limped in, clubfoot, and left this." He produced a crumpled handkerchief, monogrammed A.H., Amelia Hargrove. Crimson embroidery fringed its edge. The threads converged. Eliza blackmailing Geoffrey. Amelia, the distressed niece. Or both in league? We hastened back to Belgravia. As night fell, the hansom's lamps carving tunnels through the gloom. At the townhouse, Miss Hargrove admitted us breathlessly. "Dr. Watson, Mr. Holmes, the police have taken Eliza. She confessed to theft, a silver snuff box, but swears innocence of murder, and Geoffrey. He vanished this afternoon, leaving a note. The dragon claims it's due." Holmes's face was granite. "Show me her room." "Cyanide," I confirmed, sniffing. "Bitter almonds." Holmes pocketed the vial. "Planted. The powder is flour dusted with almond essence. A child's trick. Eliza is the scapegoat. Observe the trunk's hinges. Oiled yesterday, yet the wood is pine, not teak. No puzzle box here." Miss Hargrove wrung her hands. "Then who?" "Thorne called earlier, demanding the remaining sapphires. Said father owed him." Holmes whirled to the window. Below, in the garden, a figure in black darted from the shadows, limping, crimson shawl trailing. "After her!" We tumbled down the servant's stair, bursting into the mews. The fog had returned, a velvet curtain. Our quarry vanished, but Holmes stooped, retrieving a fallen glove. Silk, violet dyed, monogrammed E.G. No, the stitching was A.H., altered crudely. "A switch," Holmes said. "Amelia wore Eliza's glove to plant the poison, then framed the maid. The limp, padded shoe, discarded in flight." I gaped. "But the sapphires?" "Diversion. The true prize is the dragon seal's secret, a map to buried opium in Calcutta worth millions. Sir Reginald betrayed his partner there. Amelia, raised on tales of lost wealth, sought it alone." Chapter 6. Secrets of the Underground. The bells of St. Anne's had tolled 11 when Holmes dragged me from the hansom in West India Dock Road and plunged eastward on foot. The false sapphires, the planted vial, Amelia's altered glove, all pointed to a deeper game than mere inheritance. "The dragon map," Holmes muttered, "is no myth. Sir Reginald hid it in the one place no customs officer would search, the opium trade itself. Tonight we descend to the cellars where London's secrets ferment." We entered the Dragon's Rest through a bead curtain that parted like a serpent's tongue. The air was a miasma of rosewater, camphor, and the sweet, sick reek of the poppy. Reclining on low divans lay a dozen figures, sailors, lascars, a pale clerk from the city. Eyes glazed, dreams unmoored. At the far end, behind a lacquered screen carved with dragons, sat our quarry. Madame Ling, queen of Limehouse's dens, her face powdered white as bone, eyes black as the river at low tide. "Mr. Holmes," she purred in flawless English, "you honor my humble house. Tea? Or something stronger to loosen the tongue?" Holmes declined with a bow. "Information, madam. A map sealed with a dragon, brass, not gold. Carried by a woman with violet eyes and a limp that comes and goes." Madame Ling's smile never reached her eyes. "Many women limp in Limehouse. Fewer carry maps worth a Maharaja's ransom." She clapped twice. A boy appeared, no more than 12, bearing a tray of tiny porcelain cups. "Drink, then we talk." Holmes lifted a cup, sniffed, set it down untouched. "Laudanum laced, a kindness, but I prefer clarity." From his pocket he produced the brass seal taken from the scarred sailor. "This bought passage on the Oriental Star. Its twin opened Sir Reginald's safe. Where is the map it stamps?" Madame Ling's fingers tightened on her holder. "The map is a ledger of shame. Sir Reginald betrayed my brother in Calcutta, sold a cargo of opium to the Raj, pocketed the profit, left my kin to the gallows. The dragon marks the burial site, 10,000 pounds of raw gum, still cached beneath a ruined temple. Worth 100 times that today." I felt the chill of the underground vault. "And Amelia Hargrove seeks it?" "Amelia?" Madame Ling laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "The niece plays a double game. She came here Tuesday night, veiled, limping on her left foot. Yet I know her gait from Belgravia soirees. She bought silence with a sapphire, real this time. Said the old man was dead, the map hers by right." Holmes leaned closer. "She left with a guide?" "A boy. Ah Sing. He knows the tunnels beneath the docks. Old smuggler runs from the days of the East India Company. They descend at Ratcliffe Highway, emerge near the Temple of Shade in Calcutta if the stars align." She traced a finger across the table. Ash formed a crude map. "But beware. Thorne follows. He paid me in gold sovereigns to betray her path." Holmes rose. "The tunnels it is." We left the den through a false panel behind the screen, descending a spiral of brick steps that oozed moisture like a wound. The air grew colder, fouler. The river's breath seeped through the walls. Lantern in hand, Holmes led us along a brick-arched passage where rats scurried like black thoughts. The tide murmured overhead, a constant reminder that one collapse would drown us in London's bowels. 50 yards in, Holmes halted. Boot prints, small, heeled, the left deeper, Amelia's padded limp. And here, he knelt, lens to the mud. A second set, heavier, brogue pattern, Thorne or his hireling. From the wall he scraped a flake of crimson lacquer, teak again from the puzzle box. We pressed on. The tunnel widened into a brick chamber, once a customs vault. Now a shrine to forgotten commerce. Crates stamped Hargrove and Thorne 1867 lay split open, their contents long looted. In the center stood a stone pedestal. Atop it, a brass-bound chest no larger than a cigar box. The dragon seal gleamed on its lock. Holmes's fingers flew over the mechanism, click, click. The lid rose on oiled hinges. Inside, a roll of yellowed vellum inked with a map of the Hooghly River, a red dragon marking a bend near Serampore. Beneath it, a single sheet in Sir Reginald's hand. Before I could speak, a shadow detached from the darkness. Thorne stepped forward, revolver steady, his mutton chops quivering with triumph. "The map is mine, Holmes. Partnership dissolved by death. Step aside." Holmes did not flinch. "You followed Amelia here, poisoned Sir Reginald to clear the path. But the map was never in the safe. It traveled with the sapphires hidden in the false bottom of the sample pouch." Thorne's eyes widened. "Impossible. Impossible for a fool," she said coldly. "Uncle taught me the tunnels before you ever partnered him, Elias. The poison was mine. Cyanide in the decanter, arsenic planted for the police. You were to take the blame." Chapter 7. The False Alibi. The night in the Limehouse tunnels had yielded the map, but not the murderer. Thorne and Amelia had vanished in the confusion, his revolver skittering into the mud, her derringer flashing once before she melted into a side passage with the vellum. Holmes had pocketed the ruby-eyed dragon and led us out through a rusted grate onto the Isle of Dogs, where the first pale light found us soaked and grim. By 7, we were at Scotland Yard. Lestrade's mustache bristling with indignation at being roused before his tea. "Faust," Holmes announced as we entered the foyer, his voice ringing beneath the frescoed ceiling. Act 2, Scene 1, Marguerite's garden. Thorne claims he sat in the stalls, left briefly during the jewel song, returned for the finale. We shall test the precision of memory. The usher, a lad named Perkins with a face like a frightened rabbit, led us to Thorne's alleged seat, row G, center. "Mr. Thorne's a regular, sir. Always tips a florin. Tuesday he arrived late, second act, just as Mephistopheles sings Le Veau d'Or. Slipped out again during the quartet, came back smelling of brandy and river mist, left for good at the curtain. Holmes plucked it free. From the same bolt. Thorne carried the puzzle box here, opened it in the crush bar, transferred the map to Amelia during the interval. Observe, sawdust on the thread, teak again. The box was disassembled in the gentleman's cloakroom." Lestrade snorted. "Coincidence? Rich men shed threads like dogs shed fleas." Holmes rose. "Then let us fetch the fleas." He led us backstage past flats painted with infernal landscapes to the property master's domain. A grizzled veteran named Grimes unlocked a cabinet labeled Poisons, Theatrical. Inside, files of colored water, sugar glass gems, and one empty space marked Cyanide Crystals for Marguerite's madness. "Used in Act 4, Grimes muttered. "The apothecary scene. Bottle was full Monday, empty Wednesday morn. Thought the stage manager pinched it for a prank." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Thorne has access. Donor to the opera, friend of the director. He abstracted the crystals during the interval, passed them to Amelia in the crush bar. She limped back to Belgravia in a hired brougham, entered via the secret passage, laced the decanter while Sir Reginald dozed over his ledger. Thorne returned for the finale, alibi intact." We repaired to Albany, Geoffrey Hargrove's bachelor chambers, where the porter reported the young man had returned at 3 a.m., soaked and shaking, and locked himself in. Holmes picked the Yale with a bent hairpin. Inside, the air reeked of brandy and fear. Geoffrey lay fully dressed on the counterpane, a Webley revolver beside him, a note pinned to his waistcoat. "The dragon has devoured us all. Forgive me, Father." But the revolver was unfired, the note in Geoffrey's own hand, yet the ink was fresh, the paper torn from a betting slip dated Wednesday. "Suicide postponed." Holmes examined the lad's pupils, pinpricks. "Laudanum, not despair. Someone drugged him to silence questions." On the bedside table, a half-empty bottle of chlorodyne, and beneath it, a brass key engraved with a tiny dragon. The safe key, I realized. Amelia took the map, left this to implicate Geoffrey. Lestrade burst in with constables summoned by wire. "Thorne's been spotted, at the docks boarding the SS Caledonia for Bombay." We raced to St. Catherine docks, the fog now a tattered veil. The Caledonia's gangplank was rising when Holmes vaulted aboard, cane slashing the rope. Thorne stood at the rail, portmanteau in hand, face purple with rage. "Going to claim the opium alone?" Holmes taunted. "Amelia double-crossed you, took the map, left you to hang." Thorne lunged, but constables swarmed. In his pocket, the puzzle box, empty. In his valise, a forged passport and 10,000 in Bank of England notes, Sir Reginald's emergency fund. Back at the yard, Thorne cracked like walnut under a boot. "Amelia planned it all," he snarled. "Knew about the map from childhood letters. Seduced me with promises of half the hoard. I supplied the cyanide, thought it was for rats in the warehouse. She poisoned the old man, framed Geoffrey, planted the arsenic. I only forged the ledger to cover my own debts." Lestrade snapped the cuffs. "And the opera?" "Interval rendezvous in the cloakroom. She limped in, limped out. No one noticed in the crush. I returned for the finale, perfect alibi." Holmes smiled thinly. Except the crimson thread, the sawdust, the missing crystals, the stage is set, Mr. Thorne, but the curtain falls on you. At 221B, Holmes laid the pieces on the table: brass key, ruby-eyed dragon, empty file, crimson threads. Amelia remains the puppet master. She drugged Jeffrey to silence him, framed Eliza with the fake sapphires, used Thorne as cat's paw. But the map is gone, and with it the final act. I poured brandy. Where is she? Holmes stared into the fire. Where the dragon sleeps, Calcutta, but first she must tie loose ends. Watson, pack for Tilbury. The P&O Malabar sails at dawn, and Amelia Hargrove will be aboard, limp or no limp. The false alibi had crumbled, yet the true murderer sailed free. The game was not over. It had merely changed continents. Chapter 8. Echoes from the Past. The P&O Malabar had sailed at dawn, and with it Amelia Hargrove, or so the shipping manifest claimed under the alias Mrs. Reginald Thorne. Thorne himself languished in the cells at the yard, his confession a cracked vessel leaking half-truths. Holmes had spent the day in a fever of activity: wires to Calcutta, cables to Lloyd's, a visit to Somerset House for birth records. Now, at 10 o'clock, the storm broke over London with biblical fury, and the past rose like a drowned corpse. Holmes set down a test tube. Watson, the cyanide was a blind. The true poison was digitalin, extract of foxglove. Bitter almond scent from the brandy masked the cardiac arrest. Sir Reginald died of heart failure induced by a massive dose, the arsenic a theatrical flourish. I stared at the letters, 20 years old, penned in a feminine hand on paper watermarked Calcutta, 1867. From whom? Read the signature. Your devoted sister, Eliza Hargrove, Amelia's mother, presumed dead in the mutiny. She survived, married a Eurasian apothecary named Grimes, bore a daughter, our housemaid Eliza. Amelia and Eliza are cousins, not mistress and servant. Holmes unrolled the dragon map beside the letters. Sir Reginald betrayed not one partner, but two. Eliza's father supplied the opium. Reginald sold it to the Raj, pocketed the profit, left the Grimes family to the hangman. The map marks the cache, 10,000 pounds of gum still buried beneath the ruined temple. Amelia learned the truth from these letters hidden in the Belgravia attic since childhood. I turned to a postscript. If I die, let the dragon claim its due. Blood for blood. Amelia forged the threatening notes, Holmes continued. Using the dragon seal from the safe, she limped to mimic Eliza, planted the fake sapphires and cyanide to frame her cousin. Drugged Jeffrey to silence him, used Thorne as cat's paw. But the digitalin, that was personal. She distilled it herself from foxgloves in the Belgravia conservatory. A knock at the door. Mrs. Hudson, pale as parchment. Gentlemen, a lady to see you, says it's life or death. Eliza, the housemaid, entered, bonnet sodden, clubfoot dragging. Mr. Holmes, they've taken Miss Amelia. Men in a closed carriage, Thorne's hirelings, I swear. She screamed my name as they dragged her away from the docks. Holmes's eyes narrowed. When? An hour ago. I followed on foot, but the fog. She produced a torn scrap of crimson silk, part of Amelia's shawl. They went toward the river. Holmes seized his ulster. The Temple of Shade. There's a derelict chapel on the Isle of Dogs, built by the East India Company, abandoned since the mutiny. Thorne means to extract the map's secret before killing her. Watson, your revolver. We plunged into the tempest, hailing a growler on the stand. The horse slipped on the wet cobbles. Lightning forked above the river, illuminating the Malabar's riding lights far downstream. At the Isle of Dogs, the chapel loomed, a Gothic ruin choked with ivy, its stained glass saints blinded by grime. The door hung ajar. Candlelight flickered within. Holmes signaled silence. We crept through the side aisle, boots crunching on broken glass. Thorne's voice echoed, "The map, Amelia. The ruby marks the exact spot. Give me the cipher or I carve it from your skin." Amelia spat out the gag. "You'll hang, Elias. The police know everything." "Know what? That you poisoned your uncle with foxglove tea and his nightly brandy? That you framed your own cousin?" He pressed the knife to her throat. A bead of blood welled like a ruby. Holmes stepped into the light. "Drop the knife, Thorne. The game is up." The roughs lunged. I fired once into the rafters. Plaster rained. Thorne whirled, knife flashing. Holmes's cane caught his wrist. The blade clattered among the crates. Eliza limped forward, derringer steady. "For my father," she whispered, and fired, not at Thorne, but at the lantern. Oil exploded, flames licked the dry wood. Chaos erupted. Thorne bolted for the door. I tackled him into the font, water sloshing like baptismal absolution. Holmes freed Amelia, who collapsed sobbing. Eliza stood over the flames, the dragon map in her hand. "You were to burn it," Amelia gasped. "Destroy the evidence." Eliza's eyes were centuries old. "No, cousin. I was to deliver it to the Raj. My father's name cleared, the opium seized. You used me, but the dragon serves justice now." In the flickering inferno, Holmes snatched the map from Eliza's hand. Digitalin in the brandy, foxglove in the conservatory, the limpa disguise, the sapphires a diversion. But the true poison was 20 years of betrayal. The past echoes, ladies, and the echo is fatal. We escaped into the storm as the chapel collapsed, a pyre for old sins. Amelia, Thorne, Eliza, all in custody by dawn. The map, singed but legible, would guide the authorities to the cache. Sir Reginald's fortune would fund orphanages in Calcutta, a penance paid in full. Back at Baker Street, the storm spent, Holmes poured brandy. "The past is a locked room, Watson. Break the bolt and the ghosts escape, but some ghosts deserve the light." Chapter 9. The Gathering Storm. The chapel fire had consumed the last of the night, but not the case. Lestrade's men had dragged Thorne, Amelia, and Eliza to the yard in separate wagons, each protesting innocence in their own key. The map, charred at the edges yet intact, was locked in Holmes's dispatch box, awaiting a courier to the Governor-General in Calcutta. Yet something gnawed at my friend like a terrier with a rat. A discrepancy too neat, a silence too loud. Holmes lowered the bow. "Watson, the digitalin was administered in 2 doses. The first in the decanter, cyanide sent to mask the foxglove. The second in Sir Reginald's bedtime toddy, prepared by whom?" "Eliza," I answered. She admitted to the toddy. Yet her confession was coerced. Thorne's roughs threatened her mother's grave. Observe. He produced a crumpled note, found in Eliza's pocket at the chapel. "Bring the toddy at 11 sharp or the dragon burns your past." Handwriting, Amelia's. Holmes paced. Amelia distilled the digitalin, planted the arsenic, forged the ledger, framed Geoffrey, seduced Thorne, but the toddy required a second hand. Eliza was the unwitting cupbearer. The limp, the fake sapphires, the chapel fire, all diversions. The true killer needed Sir Reginald alive long enough to open the safe under duress, extract the map, then silence him. I stared at the evidence wall. Then who held the knife at the chapel? The door burst open. Geoffrey Hargrove stumbled in, soaked and wild-eyed, a Webley in his shaking hand. "Holmes, they've taken Eliza to the river. Thorne's men said they'd drown her unless I brought the map." Holmes's eyes blazed. "The map is here, safe. You're the bait, Mr. Hargrove. They want you, all loose ends in one net." Holmes seized his ulster. "Watson, the revolver. Mrs. Hudson, bar the door after us. Geoffrey, you will play the prodigal one final time." We plunged into the storm, hansom wheels hissing on the wet macadam. Geoffrey directed us to Execution Dock, where the Thames ran black and swift. the gallows shadow still etched in the minds of rivermen. The fog had lifted, but the rain fell in sheets, turning the wharf into a slick stage. Thorne's voice carried over the water. "The map, Geoffrey, or she joins the mudlarks." Holmes signaled us to fan out. I took the left crane, revolver steady. Geoffrey center, hands raised. Holmes melted into the shadows right. The rain drummed a tattoo on the planks. Geoffrey stepped forward. "The map for Eliza, no tricks." Thorne laughed, a sound like breaking crates. "You always were the fool, boy. Your father promised me the hoard, then cut me out. Amelia was to deliver, but she played us both. The map is mine now." Holmes's voice cut through the storm from the crane above. "Drop the knife, Thorne. The map is wired to Calcutta. The cash will be seized at dawn. Your game is bankrupt." Thorne whirled, knife flashing. One rough lunged at Geoffrey. I fired, the bullet splintering the cutlass. The second rough charged Holmes, but Geoffrey tackled him into the river. Splash, curse, silence. Thorne seized Eliza, dragging her toward the edge. "One step, Holmes, and she drowns." Holmes descended the crane like a cat, cane in hand. "You forget the tide, Thorne. It turns in 7 minutes. The Malabar is already at Gravesend. Amelia aboard, under arrest by the ship's master. I wired him this morning. She confessed en route, implicated you fully." Thorne's grip slackened. Eliza twisted, elbow to his ribs, broke free. Holmes's cane caught Thorne's knee. He crumpled. I cuffed him with the constable's derby, summoned by whistle minutes earlier. Eliza sank to her knees, sobbing. Geoffrey cradled her. "It's over, cousin. The dragon sleeps." Holmes retrieved the map from his coat, untouched. Not quite, one final act. We returned to Baker Street as the rain eased to a drizzle. The evidence wall was complete. Digitalin, foxglove, dragon seals, the map. Holmes poured brandy, the fire crackling like applause. "Amelia poisoned the body," he said, "but the past poisoned the soul." Thorne supplied the means, Eliza the opportunity, Geoffrey the distraction. Yet the true architect was Sir Reginald. His betrayal in '67 set the storm in motion. The gathering clouds break, Watson, and the truth falls like rain. Outside, the bells of St. Mary Le Bow struck 6, clear and clean. The dragon was slain, but its echo lingered in the wet streets of London. Chapter 10. The veil lifted. The storm had passed, leaving London washed clean and strangely quiet. At 10 o'clock precisely, Holmes had summoned every player to the scene of the crime. Mrs. Hudson had laid coffee and seed cake as though for a funeral tea. The scent of bergamot mingled with the faint, lingering bitterness of foxglove. Holmes placed the foxglove on the blotter beside the decanter. "Ladies and gentlemen, the curtain rises on the final act. Sir Reginald Hargrove died here at this desk between 11:15 and 11:30 on Tuesday night. The cause, acute cardiac arrest induced by digitalin masked by cyanide scent and arsenic misdirection. The locked door, the secret passage, the chimney, all were props. The true stage door was the human heart." He turned to Thorne. "You, sir, supplied the cyanide from the opera house, believing it destined for warehouse rats. You forged the ledger to conceal your debts. You attended Faust for an alibi, passing the puzzle box to Amelia in the crush bar, but you never entered this room." Thorne's jowls quivered. "I've confessed my part." "Which was minor," Holmes cut in. "A dupe, not the director. Amelia Hargrove," he continued. "You distilled the digitalin from conservatory foxgloves, knowing your uncle's weak heart. You forged the threatening letters with the gold dragon seal. You limped to mimic Eliza, planted the fake sapphires, drugged Geoffrey with laudanum to silence him. You entered via the secret passage at 11 sharp, laced the decanter, waited behind the bookcase until Sir Reginald drank, then forced him. under threat of the knife you later used at the chapel to open the safe and surrender the map. Amelia's violet eyes blazed. "Prove it." Holmes produced a glass slide. Microscopic analysis of the decanter residue, digital in crystals identical to those in the conservatory soil adhering to your left boot heel. The limp was padded, the right boot shows normal wear. You returned at 1 a.m. to retrieve the map, disturbed Jeffrey at the keyhole, fled through the garden leaving the crimson thread. He turned to Eliza. You prepared the toddy at 11:15, innocent of its contents. Amelia intercepted it in the pantry, added the second dose, returned it to you. Your confession was coerced. The note in your pocket, "Bring the toddy or the dragon burns your past," written in Amelia's hand, proven by the slant of the G. Eliza lifted her chin. "I wanted justice for my father. Amelia promised the map would clear his name. She lied." Jeffrey spoke, voice raw. "I saw father alive at 11. I quarreled, left through the garden. When I returned at 1, he was dead. I panicked. Thought the police would blame me." Holmes faced Lestrade. The sequence: Amelia enters via passage at 11, who hides. Eliza delivers toddy at 11:15. Digital in dose 1. Sir Reginald drinks, weakens. Amelia emerges, forces safe open, takes map. Dose 2 in the decanter. Cyanide scent added from opera file. She bolts the door from within using a silk thread through the keyhole, retrieves it via the chimney, exits through the secret panel. Jeffrey peers through keyhole at once and sees body, flees. Thorne's only crime, supplying the cyanide and forging the ledger. Lestrade snapped his notebook shut. "Amelia Hargrove, I arrest you for the murder of Sir Reginald Hargrove. Elias Thorne for conspiracy and theft. Eliza Grimes and Jeffrey Hargrove, you are free to go. Pending corroboration." Amelia laughed, a sound like breaking ice. "You'll never prove intent." Uncle was old, his heart failing. Holmes produced a final exhibit, a miniature phonograph cylinder taken from the safe. Recorded Tuesday night, 11:22 p.m., Sir Reginald's voice, dictated under duress. "Amelia, my own niece, poisons me for a map I buried in blood. Let the dragon take her soul." The machine was running. You forgot to stop it. Constables moved forward. Amelia lunged for the decanter. Holmes caught her wrist. "The veil lifts, Miss Hargrove. Greed, not justice, was your motive. The opium cash will fund schools in Calcutta, not your pockets." As they were led away, Holmes addressed the room. "The past is a poison, slower than digitalin. Sir Reginald betrayed a partner in 67. 20 years later, the debt was called in blood. Let this be a lesson. Some dragons devour their own." At Baker Street, over coffee and Mrs. Hudson's scones, Holmes reflected, "A satisfying resolution, Watson. The locked room was never the door, it was the human soul bolted by guilt." I raised my cup. To truth, then, and to the end of dragons. The case was closed, the veil lifted in London, fog, gaslight, and all breathed easier in the light of day.